Data Privacy Notice. De La Salle College of St. Benilde, or DLSCSB, respects your right to privacy and is committed to protect the confidentiality of your personal information, thus has adapted necessary organizational, technical, and physical measures to secure it. DLSCSB is bound to comply with the Data Privacy Act of 2012, or RA 10173, its implementing rules and regulations, and relevant issuances of the National Privacy Commission. By participating in this video meeting, conference, or webinar, you are consenting to our collection and use of information, including recording, in accordance with this privacy notice. Information is also processed via video conferencing platform Zoom. Please refer to their privacy policy at the website. The information processed, such as name, email address, your image, video, and audio, will be used for attendance, documentation, communication, and systems administration purposes by authorized individuals of department, office, or unit organizing the event, and other offices authorized to have access. We also use the information gathered from you for abuse prevention and privacy protection. DLSCSB shall only retain the said personal information until it serves its purpose, after which it shall be securely disposed of. Queries and complaints can be directed to the Data Protection Officer via email at dpo@benilde.edu.ph.
I will lead the prayer. Let us all remember that we are in the holy presence of God. In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, Amen. Together, let us all say the Lasallian prayer. I will continue, O my God, to do all my actions for the love of you. Our Lady of the Star,
Pray for us.
pray for us. Saint John Baptist de La Salle,
Pray for us.
pray for us. Saint Benilde
Pray for
Romanson,
us.
Pray for us.
pray for us. Leave Jesus in our
Forever.
hearts
Forever.
forever. Yeah. So, yeah. Good afternoon, all. Good afternoon, good afternoon. Some of you are having lunch or taking lunch ngayon, okay lang. Kaya lang wag na kayong mag-multitasking ngayon. Most likely kasi baka dalawa yung pinapanood nyo. Okay? Wag nyo na pong gawin. Kasi we want your attention. Siyempre dahil yung webinar ngayon is more highly encouraging. Lalong-lalo na yung mga nagtitesis dyan. Kasi this is more of creative industry. Kasi nasa creative industry din tayo. No? Pero guys, reminders lang po, yung topic na ito, it is not meant to override yung mga instructions ng mga mentors ninyo. Hindi po siya ganon. Okay, this is more like to widen your horizon of research. So maybe more possibility kasi most likely yung mga topic na hinahanap natin is multi aspect, multi So most likely yun ang hinahanap ninyo. So without further ado, I would like to introduce interior designer. Okay, si Hannah Galang-Dumlao. Sino ba si mag-introduction muna tayo Sino ba si interior designer Hannah Galang-Dumlao? So she is a graduate of Masters in Fine Arts and Design with a best thesis of ang title ng best thesis niya is a phenomenological design exploration of bamboo forms for site-specific installations through the process of biomimicry and parametric design. Panis, ang haba, di ba? Her undergrad course is a Bachelor of Science in Interior Design sa Assumption College sa Makati. She is currently a mentor dito sa CSB. Nasa Interior Design plantilla siya. Pero before, initially sa architecture program. So, hindi na malayo nakilala namin siya, your professors, no? Kasi halos kaibigan na rin namin siya. No? Kasi 2013 or 12, nandito na siya sa amin. And she is actually the VProd manager ng interior designer. She worked under Itokish, and Gentile New Home, All Modern Home, and she is also a freelance designer. She became an editorial assistant in Space Magazine and a contributing writer for Philippine Institution of Interior Designer, or sa PIID. She had a lot of public exhibitions and maraming art installations experience and also editorial works. Kaya yun yung rason kung bakit siya yung perfect for our webinar today. Again, I introduce you Miss Hannah Galang-Dumlao. So, Miss Hannah?
Hi, good afternoon, guys.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Zen. Grabe ka sa halos kaibigan. Nahurt ako doon.
Siyempre, kailangan may boundaries ka pa rin eh.
Yeah,
Dapat medyo formal ng konti. Kaya halos kaibigan.
Yeah. All right. So, thank you for having me here. It's been a long time to actually face you guys and talk to architecture students. Some of you here have been my mentees when you guys were in Frosh, but I believe right now you are actually in the twilight experience of your archi school. So maybe it's time for you to get some refresher. And that's my goal for this afternoon. I would like to give you a disclaimer that this will not be a thesis writing class. Rather, it is more of giving you possibilities on how you could tap on your research creatively and to actually really put the bounds of creative research and scientific research and understand how they can actually meet each other in order for you to create better results, better research questions, and even a better process. So there's that. So today, our topic, allow me to share my screen for a while. Okay. All right. So today I'll be talking about creative research methods, and in turn, at the end of my presentation, I'll be showing you some samples of how you could actually apply the different approaches of creative research in your research endeavors. Okay. So just a brief background. I want to talk to you about how I got into art and how I got into the idea of taking my master's in art. So when I was choosing what I would specialize in for grad school, one thing was very certain to me. I really wanted to pursue something that dabbles on the practice of art. I credit this fascination with art to my mother, who is actually an exhibiting artist painter. I grew up spending my afternoons in our living room with schoolwork at hand and, of course, the sight of my mom painting. It would vary, her artworks, depending on the season. Portraits made out of pencil and pastel and oil painting commissions when it was time for her to earn. And when it was time for her to exhibit her techniques, I would see works of the influence of Fauvism, abstract expressionism, and such. I remember while watching my mom, I would often ask her, how are these artworks made? And why do you even make these? Okay. So sometimes she would not answer me and just let me watch. But most of the time, when she has the patience to, she would answer me that art is actually made for people, that it serves a message or a certain sense of representation of it could be a memory, it could be a fantasy, a story, whether it be something that has happened or that has not. But the main goal of art is to actually create a story for its viewers. So those are the two things that I have always been dabbling in as a kid, growing around the creative environment. How are things made and why are they made? I grew up skimming through her books in oil painting, Impressionism, Fauvism, and contemporary art, among others, of course. I would always go back to the pages where the works of Monet, Renoir, Alfred Sisley, and Henri Matisse because I was very much gravitated towards their techniques in detail, lighting, proportion, and how their works seemingly paint, create, and illustrate time as if it was breathing alive in front of you. So, since I grew up from the lens of art. The curiosity about how things came to life and fruition was always present. At a very early age, I was pretty much established in my brain. It was established how art was produced because I see it from my mom and her art group. I knew that it took a lot of errors, frustrations, roadblocks, and breaking. I also knew that it took a lot of eureka moments, of irritations, of iterations, and lots of sketches to be able to come up with something so concrete. I knew that art wasn't easy. It never comes as a happenstance. And no matter how hard it is, that the contemporary age tells us art is for art's sake. Art has a process, and art has an intention, and art will always have a story to tell. And this is what I would like to give to you. I would like to submit to you. Art has a process, and so it's actually evident that it also needs to be researched. And there is actually a process for every artist to come up with their artworks. Okay, so when I finally got into art school for my master's degree, I thought I was ready and I thought I knew somehow what I was going into. It was such a surprise when my mentor, the grandson of Fernando Amarsolo, Dean Don Amarsolo, spoke to us and broke into the classroom and said, if you came here because you were expecting to make art, then I'm sorry, you're not really going to. Right? At least not that much, he said. He also said that this is a research driven program. So at the back of my head, how do you even research art? At that time, I was coming from the lens that you just make art because you want to. How else can we, represent art? Why do we need to write about it? Why do we need to find out the precedents that inspire artists to create certain forms of art and such? And so I was a bit irate, but my ego, along with the rest of my classmates, who were at that time a variation of painters, graphic artists, and sculptors, our egos were broken right before our very eyes. What is it that we will do then? That is our question to our mentor, Mr. Amarsolo. And he said, you will read, research, write, and repeat for 2 years. And he said that as if he was a kid in a candy store. And at that time, we really didn't understand it. This is how I got introduced to creative research. It all started with the breaking of the ego. And at that time, I really didn't see the importance of ego and how it could disrupt us. In the duration of my 2 years of master's degree, I was able to create and exhibit my work only 3 times. The rest entailed a lot of journal reading, teaching demonstrations, art investigation, research papers, and written critiques. We were trained to read, write, and create from the lens of these ideals: intention, image, and impression. Why are you creating? What is it that you want to show? Image. And what is it that you want to say? And how do you want it to be heard? Impression. Before we dig deeper into our talk today, allow me to define some terms first, just so we are on the same page, okay? So, since we are here to talk about creative research, I think it's only right for us to lay down the first definition that we should be defining. What is creativity? So, remember, I talked about ego, and we all have that. Ego comes from where we actually got used to living, how we were brought up. Ego is how we were sculpted by our parents, by our community, by our school. So we are coming from an architecture ego, an interior designer's ego. It could be a graphic designer's ego and such. We all bear this ego because it makes us, it creates our whole being. But does that make us creative? Does that call us to be creative people? The meaning of creativity actually varies from lens to lens. A lot of people, a lot of theorists, and even philosophers tried to really anchor the meaning of creativity, but actually they can't, because creativity differs from culture to culture, from language to language, and background to background. But if we could really gel all the meanings together, the universality of creativity, we can actually define it as the ability to bring into existence something new. It could be a solution to a problem, a method, a device, a new device, or a new artistic object or form. Notice the operative word in this description, new. Okay. We're always asked, or we're always encouraged to look for new ways to approach things. And redundantly, if you were my students back in Esteta, or if you were students of Esteta, you would probably know this already. But to give you a major throwback, Aristotle actually once argued that there is nothing original, and everything comes from the idea and the practice of mimesis. Everything that comes in front of us is breathed and inspired by what is around us. So if we peel out our ego and our ownership over innovations and developments that we see around us, we will all be reminded that this could all be considered as form of mimesis. Ideas spring up from nature, from different culture, from day-to-day occurrences, from our joy, from our pain, from memory, and from our fantasies. And to argue Aristotle's point of view on originality or newness, he actually said that those things are most likely to be mimicked from existing things. They can still be deemed as new from person to person, because since we all come from different lenses and backgrounds, our interpretation of the same thing could be different. A bowl, for example, perhaps could mean a trinket dish for one. It could be a fruit bowl to the other. It could be a serving bowl for someone. And then for me, I could probably be defining a bowl as a sculpture. So you see, the meaning of the same thing differs and varies depending on where we came from. And this is what Plato was trying to explain to us. You know, it is dictated by internal factors. Our idea of something new, or interpretation of something new or original, is dictated by internal factors and external factors like our birth origin, our gender orientation, our culture, our upbringing, interests, so on and so forth. So, what exactly is the context of new in this definition of creativity? I would like to submit this meaning as I was able to write about it before. And I saw it in my journal and I wanted to share it to you guys. New could be a renaissance, a renewal, or a refreshing of some sort. New could be contemporary, something that flows through the tide of time, space, and people, seasons perhaps. Not to mention, we are also influenced by trends that happen from generation to generation. New is a hybrid of things that are existing and things that still hasn't existed. New is not necessarily new, it just keeps improving with the intention of disrupting and changing the paradigms. And that is where you, me, or the creator, our creativity and creation come in. Creation or creating is probably one of the most challenging disciplines out there. We are always challenged to bring out something different, and we are always asked to be disruptive. You're all here because most of you are probably required to, but I also know that somewhere deep within the burrows of your mind and your consciousness, you're yearning to figure out how you can be unique, how you can bring out a voice of reason, how you can be revolutionary in your own right, and how you can make something new. You are, after all, a creative. So, Miss Hannah, how do you define the creative? Who is considered creative? Is it just us who study art and design? Or can it be anyone who produces something or who has the capacity of producing something? It is said that every thinker or researcher has the potential to develop and use creativity. Again, every thinker or researcher has the potential to develop and use creativity. It's not necessarily about our skills in drafting or drawing or creating impressive renders and collages. It's not about our skills in painting and performing specific forms of art. Although I cannot deny that these skills cannot be discounted because they actually add up to the knowledge and the influence of the expression of creativity when you are researching. But in the realm of art, design, science, and technology, creativity is no longer simply about geniuses and experts of certain forms of art, geniuses that create paradigm shifting discoveries. It's no longer about that. It's about encompassing the different types of creativity that leads to everyday breakthroughs and recognizes the potential of collaborative research and collaborative effort. The creative is not restricted to a painter, to an artist, to a sculptor, to an architect, or an interior designer. The creative could also be the street sweeper, the miner, and your brother, your younger brother. So basically, a creative is actually someone who has the capacity to think of solutions and certain interpretations of things that could be made better or could be interpreted in another light. So this is an example. I'm pretty sure you've pretty much heard about chiaroscuro. When you date back all the artworks, even during the Byzantine period, you're actually going to see that paintings are flat and it has no sense of volume and mass. But it was during the time of Leonardo da Vinci and the other artists that the idea of shadows and volume and mass and texture was introduced into illustrations of people and human bodies. And this evolved through time. You know, from pencil to charcoal, it evolved because pigment was discovered and painters were more schooled. So their techniques in illustrating images were more, what do you call this? I would say technical and were more studied. And so from the mere idea of, oh, maybe it would be nice to make an image pop up by creating shadows, to actually creating a study about it. Okay, this painting in the middle, the girl with the pearl earrings by Johann Vermeer. Okay, so this is actually an example of it, and it's an icon of chiaroscuro. But it didn't stop there. As time progressed and as people, technology progressed as well along with it, um, the idea of chiaroscuro now transcends to the practice of film, of photography, and even stage and lighting design. Okay, so that is how evolution happens in creativity. And that is the idea of newness to you. Okay, so it may have been inspired by something that was already existing, but the fact of the matter is, it's no longer the same process. Something gets add up from time to time as you progress through time. So that's the idea. Another illustration for you would be this one, the search engine. Before, during the time of our forefathers, libraries were towering, and we see it in movies. We only get to see that when we travel to Europe or when we watch the movies now. But gone are the days where you really need to stay the whole day in the library to really look for the book that you specifically need for a specific cause, because it has evolved from you going to the library and chancing upon books to the idea of cataloging, which means putting another area in the library wherein you could pull out the cards and look for the specific location of a book and the details of the book, up until tech era happened, and then the search engine happened, Yahoo, Google, Bing, name it. The idea, the discipline of research and studying and searching for something is now at the mercy of your fingertips. So it did not entail an artist to do this. It did not entail someone who studied fine arts to do this. It just entailed someone who was irritated by the idea of being so hassled with the long process that this happened. So you see, it's all about answering specific time of pain points that happen in our day-to-day occurrences. That is a creative. Okay. So my mentor once said that the idea of disruption springs up from human ego. We all want to stand out and do something, quote unquote, first. And we are all fueled by the burning desire to change the inconvenient, to reform pragmatic practices and ways of seeing in order to continuously adapt and sculpt the future. But redundantly, guys, it's also the same ego that disrupts progressive learning. It clouds our minds, it cripples the essential objectives of learning at the same time. So, where do we stand? Where do we stand, and how do we balance our ego and our desire to change what needs to be changed? The answer is through research, creative research in my context. From time immemorial, research grounds our ideas. Okay, it was there, it was invented to compartmentalize things in order for us to have a systematic process of experimentation, analysis, production, and even the conclusion of results. You might be thinking, Miss, research is so limiting. I have all these ideas in my head. I'm doing my Artist 9 proposal, or I'm working on my Artist 10. I already have this idea. But since we're asked to create a book, it's so limiting. It paralyzes my creativity. I've heard that time and time again. But the great thing about creative research is that you, as the researcher, you're allowed to include your creative practice, your creative methods and ideas, and even your creative method in the research to solidify the intentions and results of your thesis. Okay. If there is something that I want you to remember, research, according to Helen Cara, is part of everyday normal human activities. You actually unconsciously practice it. We gather, we analyze, and we use data so constantly as long as we live our daily lives in the very own bodies that we have. If there is one book that I want you guys to try to skim or to really have and own, that would be Creative Research Methods, a Practical Guide by Helen Cara. It was published in 2020, and it's such a nice book to start with. Again, I highlight the start with part because it shouldn't be just the only resource that you should have if you want to dabble into creative research. You really need to read a lot because literatures differ from lens to lens, and it's only up to you to really define which one relates to your type of research lens and all. But yeah, this book is good, okay, so to speak. Now, Helen Cara said that this type of research is actually called as informal research. Informal because you don't really need a background of the study here. You don't really need a methodology. Heck, you're even practicing the methodology as you live your life and you're not even conscious of it. Okay, that's how informal it is. But how is informal research important? Okay, informal research is practiced daily nga, diba? Most of the time unconsciously, and this is what makes an idea creative. Okay. The informal things that you practice from day to day are things that could give you an idea to revolutionize certain claims or ideas that you're already brewing in your head for your research. Say, for example, you're researching about the pain points of commuting. Okay. And you are a commuter. You have lived commuting all your life. But it is only when you are already ready to write about the commuter's experience that you actually notice that, hey, it takes 5 steps to get to that station. And it actually takes me 20 movements before I could sit properly in the jeepney. Okay, so those things, those informal happenings in your surroundings could be a chance for you to go back to that memory or go back to that experience or even relive it to create a more formal narration and data of what happens in a commute experience. And this particular ignored informal behavior or event could actually greatly influence the way you design transport systems or transport hubs because you want to make a commuter's life easier because you've lived it, you know how hard it is, and you know the funny things that happen around that life. And so you can very much empathize with it. And all the more you get to create something that really matters and that really counts when it comes to improving lives. Okay, so that's an example. Formal research questions often develop from informal research, just like the example that I gave you a while ago. This was stated by Madsen in 2000, in the year 2000. So basically, it just says that formal research and informal research are not, individual entities. They actually go hand in hand together. And gone are the days wherein you're really strapped to your seat and just really practice the scientific way or approach of research because as time progressed, mas naniniwala na yung mga tao na actual life experience and actual opinions of people who have lived things matter and count when it comes to creating research questions and research objectives for the project that you're trying to design. So what is creative research, Miss Hannah? A few decades ago, research was like what I said a while ago. Research was considered as a neutral activity where the researchers are tied to their labs alone or the site of their research, and they don't really have the capacity or the freedom or influence to affect or to have an effect in the results of their research. They're purely dependent on survey data, scientific data, anything that's been computed and proven by mathematics or science. That was how research really seen before. But it was only until the recent years that opinions and views about art-based or creative research turned the tables for research methodologies, in which we as researchers are more open to questioning ourselves about the old ways and have new approaches and new takes on how we could apply the traditional methods of research. Okay, so like what I said, Yan, researchers are more open to questioning right now. And we are more open to gathering data that is not restricted by math or science alone. So through time, okay, creative research methods have proven to help answer complex, contemporary questions that conventional or traditional research methods alone no longer can. Because face it, you're living in a contemporary era, and every year, the paradigm shifts, the need shifts, and so is the need to adjust the way you approach your research. Okay, so according to Helen Cara in her book, creative is not synonymous with innovation. Okay, I do not mean to rain on anyone's parade here. I'm just stating someone's opinion. Okay, because I highly agree with this. I used to not, but as time developed and as I developed as well, I strongly believe that creative is not synonymous with innovation. And later on, I'll tell you why. Researchers are sorry, I'm okay. Sorry, I got distracted. All right. So, yeah, according to Helen Cara, uh, creative is not synonymous with innovation, right? Because researchers are constantly pressured to innovate, and as an end result, they end up overpromising and overstating things and producing understated results or understated processes, meaning big promises, big outputs, or in our context, big visual outputs, but the process behind it, when you already ask the designer or the artist about the process, he or she cannot explain it properly because we were so obsessed with the idea of I want to create something new, something different from that person. La 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 la. Okay, so that's the type of thinking that Helen Cara wanted to break in this book. She wanted for us to let go of our ego and just really focus on what matters. In this subject, it's about research and innovating for the better future and for the generations that will come after us. Okay, so she stated that though some methods are innovative or a combination of creative and innovative, okay, most often than not, the results are rather creative than innovative. She's just saying that you cannot really discount the idea of creative research in innovation. In innovation, creativity is just a part of it. Okay, it's not the meat of it. It's just part of it, along with other things, along with other data, along with other supporting factors that would strengthen that creative claim or creative treatment to your innovation. So that's one thing that I want you guys to really focus on with your research or with your thesis or even your artist subject. It's not about the form. It's about the context and how it will be sculpted in at the end of the day. Kasi perspectives are just perspectives. But if it does not answer something, then I believe that you have failed as creatives, as designers, and as solution providers. Okay, so I wanted to give you like a comparison between the scientific research and creative research because it's really important. A lot of people are saying, "Oh, pasay na ang scientific research. Hindi na tayo dapat nagaganyan. Dapat nakafocus na lang tayo sa creativity." Kasi alam mo yon, history is dead, right? Pero no, it's not. The traditional methods have worked. We have to face it. It has worked from time to time. And although we fall short in some areas in that traditional method of research, they are also the ones teaching us how to do it in another way and how to make it better. Okay? So you cannot really leave scientific research behind. You still need it because it will back you up. Okay, so this is a table that will illustrate to you the difference between each other. But that doesn't mean that the other is better than the latter. Okay, so in creative research, it's more open to general community during all phases, from experimentation to production to even conclusion. There's a certain sense of community, meaning collaboration. Um, there's also the idea of partnering up with someone when it comes to creating this research, and it's often contextual. So there's always a context when you are creating something. It really doesn't spring up at an instant. It has to have a context, regardless of what it is, regardless if it's social, political, religious. Um, it has to have a context, and of course, normally. Technology is used as a form of expression or medium, meaning in your outputs, technology isn't really discounted. It's always a part of it, regardless of the medium of expression that you want to have: photography, videography, and so on and so forth. Now, in scientific research, okay, it's more reserved to established institutions, okay, and therefore it's invisible to general communities, meaning everything is not disclosed. Okay, some things maybe it could be the questionnaires and all, but other things not necessarily alam ng lahat. Okay, so it's quite exclusive, and the data is quite very fragile, often fragile, and not shared by anyone. Um, and it's also often observation oriented. So meaning it takes a lot of time and effort to observe. Having 5 samples is not enough. Having 10 samples is not enough to claim that commuting in the Philippines is a breeze, right? So it takes a lot of observation and data gathering. Okay. And then for the interpretation, normally you use tools or instruments for observation. So this could be in a form of an online survey or an Excel sheet and all. So technology will always be present. But in both types of research, you actually deal with community, nature, and technology. So when can we use creative research? Okay. So according to Helen Cara, she actually gave a really nice example of the focus group discussion method. Okay. So she talked about this. I'm sure you guys are familiar with it. Okay. So this method of research was developed in the 1940s, and we really cannot claim pure innovation when we use methodologies like this one in our research. But she's saying that though there is a certain system of conducting focus group discussions, okay, it is also nice to insert creativity into how you can conduct your focus group discussions. It's no longer very rigid. The questions are no longer very, structured. Most of the focus group discussions right now are more conversational, I would say, and it would be more interactive between the interviewer and the people who are talking. So if before in focus group discussions you're only looking at the answers to the question, when you're trying to innovate this type of method by adapting or applying creative research methods, you are also trying to look at facial expressions of your respondents, kinetics, meaning body reactions. You could also talk about their tone. Okay. You can also deal with how they interact or how they react to other people's answers. So there are a lot of things that you could dabble on already in the focus group discussion. It's no longer the answer. So that's how you can also apply creative research methods in traditional research methods. Okay, so hybrid siya. You're not leaving something behind. It's always a hybrid of things. So there is a common misconception with creative research. Before we start with when can we use creative research, I want to talk about this. So Helen Cara pointed out that oftentimes people say that the only ones practicing creative research are the ones in the art and social science practice. But actually, no. Creative research is actually being practiced also by the STEM disciplines, particularly the molecular studies, biology, chemical studies and all. It's being practiced as well as the humanities. Okay, so creative research could adapt to any form of disciplines, not just art. So I want to put it out there. Okay, so when can we use creative research? Okay, creative research addresses complex research questions. Okay, particularly in relation to new trends or aspects in social life. So if you're trying to talk about these things like paradigm shifts, generational differences between generation A and generation B, okay, and you're trying to find answers about it, you can actually try to apply the creative research method when you're doing research like this. Another type of or another way of applying creative research methods is if your research is focused on specific problem solving ideas, or if your topic is about emerging ideas where there's a large degree of uncertainty because there's a lack of data or there's a lack of support, literature. Okay, so it is actually also an opportunity for you to exercise creative research methods. Okay, so another way to apply creative research method is when you wish to have your research, or if your research has a specific aim of challenging or changing responding to dominant assumptions in society, when you're talking about gender roles, safe spaces, and other things like this, creative research methods are very helpful for these kind of things. So what do they try to, or what does creative research method try to address or support in research? It's when you're trying to tackle or dabble on things that aren't usually talked about in research. And usually, oftentimes, they are related to art, to society, to humanities, and even religion and such. So it's always nice to apply the creative research method with this one. Now, one of the most important things to do for creative research is to list down specific objectives, okay, of your research and consider which methods will effectively address your research objectives. Okay, so there are actually four main areas of creative research methods, and I want to share them with you. It's art-based, okay, research using technology, and then you have the mixed methods, and then transformative. Okay, so the arts-based method, okay, focuses on using artistic processes. Okay, so as the main way of understanding and exploring experiences. Okay, so art-based research methods can be effective in exploring the subjective experience of people, abstract concepts where verbal descriptions may not be sufficient, okay, sensitive topics that cannot be verbalized but could be expressed through drawings, to sketches, collages, or even performance art. Okay, so that's the art-based method. It's heavily influenced by the disciplines of art when it comes to expression. When words fall short, this is what you use. That's basically what I just put in my mind whenever I deal with arts-based method. And actually, the things that I will be showing you later are all arts-based method. Okay, so I'll show it to you later. Now, the other type of creative research method is the research using technology. Okay, so it's usually done through digital means. Of course, we are in the digital world, and there are a lot of technical changes, especially during the pandemic and development. So might as well utilize this to create a research. Before, naabutan ko pa yon na hindi ka pwedeng mag-interview online or hindi ka pwedeng mag-Google Sheets. Kailangan pumunta ka talaga sa community to really have and collect your data. Okay? I'm pretty sure yung ibang prof nyo dito na nag-masters dati, experience nila to, kailangan nilang pumunta sa site ng nire-research nila. But now, since we have the technology, we could exercise data collection using different forms of surveys online. And we could reach wider audiences and not just local. We could go global or global, perhaps. And then the transcription could also be digital, meaning the interpretation, you could use an aid of a software or of some sort. And then, of course, it's the same with the analysis. So what this does is it makes your process, your methodology, and your transcription easier, and it makes it more efficient, and it cuts down the areas of error for your study. Okay, so this is another thing that is being applied or practiced when you're doing creative research. Another is mixed methods, meaning you're mixing things here and there. It's used to help contextualize, analyze, write, present, and share your findings. So the mixed methods is used when you're seeking to explore questions or topics that are too complex for one single method to address. Okay, so if, for example, you feel like your study is not really just about or it won't really just tackle on arts-based methods, then you can apply other things. Okay? Other things. Kaya nga minsan humahaba ang research title kasi ang dami nang na-apply na things doon. So that's another way of illustrating what mixed method research is, basically. But it's not really meant to confuse you. It shouldn't. It actually should help you process things better, explain things better in your paper, and illustrate things better through graphs, through photographs and illustrations and such. Okay, so the other type of creative research is transformative, okay, or the other method, the transformative research method. So if your research is aiming to challenge, to change what might be seen as something that is of status quo in society, if you want to bring out specific types of questions that are morally, socially, religiously related, and you need more data that isn't really meeting the traditional types of data, then this one could be for you. Okay, so there are actually three types of transformative or transformative research methods. So there's participatory research, okay, there's action research, and community-based research. So in participatory research, you're actually incorporating mixed methods into your research because your aim is to involve people you are working with through the whole research, meaning it could be co-researchers, your samples, your collaborators, and other things. So it's not just you who's doing the research, you are a group, okay? And then the other one is action research. It's undertaken when the researcher and participants in the research process work together to diagnose the issue and problem to be addressed. So meaning you are working in a small group, but also trying to compartmentalize the data that you've collected together, and you try to help each other out by exchanging the ideas and the data that you have gathered together. And last but not the least is community research, okay, or community-based research. It's a type of research that may be of relevance to community-focused research ideas, or if you're trying to support or create certain forms of information like infographics for communities and other things like illustrations for reproductive health and others or such. Okay, so this is community based, meaning you're getting data from the community, and the things that you will be creating are based from the things that the community has provided to you. Okay, so it's only through understanding a community that it is possible for you to come up or derive with a solution or a conclusion. Okay, and oftentimes this is actually partnered with the practice of empathy. So you shouldn't be coming into the research, or you shouldn't start the research if you're coming from the lens of privilege. Kumbaga. So an example of this would be a good friend of mine trying to write a research paper when we were in school, and she was trying to address why this specific group of IP community cannot seem to adapt to modern times. But then again, she also wrote this in her findings that I was coming from the lens of um, privilege. I was looking at it from this privilege, but this certain community really isn't progressing because they don't want to, and they want to preserve what they have, and they want to pass that on to the generations after them. And so they are trying to really enclose themselves. And that is intentional. And there's really nothing the modern man can do about it. So sometimes research could be like that. You have a whole or completely different set of questions and things in mind, but in your conclusion, in your findings, they're sometimes redundant. So in these things, these methods actually help you process those kind of things or come up or derive with that kind of thing. So I want to share these excerpts from a book that I've read. I'll try to share the book to Sir Ben so he can give it to the other mentors also. Maybe some of you are interested. So this is a quote from Collins, 2019. It could be argued that research in the creative industries need to produce findings that will advance both knowledge and understanding, but that will also address the issues and practical problems that evolve for practitioners within the creative industries. So it's not just about researching for the sake of knowledge, understanding, advancement, but it's also about creating or addressing specific issues that will make things better, okay, for a certain type of group or a certain type of peoples. Okay, so design research or creative research both inspires imagination and it informs intuition through a variety of methods with related intents. Notice the operative word in everything that I've told you. There always has to have intention. Okay, so it's only when you have intention will the patterns be exposed, the layers will come through and will help you in your process. So without further ado, I think I only have until 2:30 to talk to you. I'm sorry, it's quite long, but I'll give you three samples of things that I've worked on while I was still in grad school. So this first example that I will be showing you is from a subject that I had called New Media and Art Practice. So in this subject, we are asked to read tons of readings every week, and our mentor will assign us to read about specific type of art form, and we had 1 week to create a research paper about it, to develop ideas about it, and when it is approved, we were asked to teach our class. So, ganon. So, technically, parang nagpe-prepare ka ng lesson, but before you prepare your lesson, your mentor has to approve if tama ba yung flow ng ideas. So, creative research is not just applied in creating physical or coming up with physical solutions. It could also be applied when you're trying to process thoughts, when you're trying to study something and you want people to understand it also. The best way to do it is to also learn it in depth. And that's what I learned. Okay, so this is a teaching demonstration that I came up with about gutay. Okay, I don't know if you've heard about gutay. It's actually a Japanese term. Okay, so it's the Japanese gutay. It's actually a type of performance art um, in Japan, and I wanted to relate it with the theory of performativity, okay, and how it could be applied in new media or new art practice. So before I came up with the lecture, this is the literature that came with it. I did not include in the slides na the things that I had to read, but basically these are screen caps of my paper. Okay, I had to introduce what Japanese gutay meant. Okay. And for me to understand what Japanese gutay is, I had to read about literature on where it sprung from, where it came from, why it happened, and why are they creating art this way? Because if you actually try to Google Japanese gutay, it's one of those arts that you will laugh at because it doesn't make sense. You'll find people um, banging their heads with paint in the wall, rolling in the floor, painting with their hair, or ripping their clothes off. Okay, so it then it makes sense to the lens of someone who's not coming from the lens of academe or even art research. So I was really into this. I wanted to explain it to the people who have no knowledge of what Japanese gutay was. So as you can see, before I came up with a lecture, you had to go through the same thing that you're going through probably right now with research. You had to have an abstract, okay? You had to have an introduction. You had to put your methodology, and you also had to have your RRL or the results and discussions. Okay, so it's the same thing. Okay, like what I said a while ago, you cannot really completely veer away from the traditional methods of research, but it is your interpretation and it is your probably methodology that could also be helpful to have a creative take on it. So at the end, when I got approved, I was given the go to create my lecture about Japanese gutay. I did the lecture to fine art students and to the master students about Japanese gutay. I had to discuss to them and give them the background about it, show them examples, show them videos. And there was a time where I also made them do the activity themselves so that they could understand it properly. Okay. So the other type of project that I want to share with you is a personal favorite of mine. It's called Sons of a Glitch. It's for a subject called traditional and digital hybrids, wherein we had to investigate the relationship between traditional forms of art and the contemporary forms of art, which is digital media technically. So this is actually a capstone project or like the final project wherein we were asked to exhibit something for the National Arts Month, and it was exhibited in the campus gallery. And people from the outside were brought in to experience our exhibits. So my part or my contribution in the exhibit is this one. It's actually a film, um, and I performed in the film. So it's an inception, and I intentionally wanted to live in that film. So I'll explain to you the process. All right. So I started with a question: have we really made things better? Okay, so this was a time wherein I was very active in commuting. So I had more time to I was studying in Philippine Women's University, and that area is very far from the the environment of SDA. You know, it's more dense, and it's not that protected. But at the same time, I'm seeing a lot of developments, condominiums being built, and other things. But at the same time, I'm also hurt by the redundancy of people not really having so much in their lives. So you could say that it came from a very existential question. Have we really made things better? Or are we really making things better through our practice or through this knowledge that we claim to have? Okay, so this is a sample. This is just
An abandoned building. An untouched theater. A rotting entryway to what was, and died down to what has become, to what has become, to what has become, to what has become. A swing prancing along the wind without a child. A street without youthful glee. A home filled with people, yet closed doors. Scripted smiles and laughters that fade away within a click. State of a culture, state of a person. Disconnected, disoriented, lost and distraught. Lost and distraught. Disconnected, disoriented, lost and distraught.
Okay, so to explain to you what you just watched, it's actually a 7-minute film. But basically, the process here was there were three things that were practiced here: film, poetry, and digital glitch. Okay, so I had to learn how to manipulate through glitching, and I had to learn how to mix audio through glitching the audio. It was fun because I had to learn from a friend who was doing sounds at that time. So I had a consultant to teach me how to produce this one. So my intentions for this artwork was to really tease people. Because whenever we see something like this, an artwork like this projected in a wall, the initial intention or the initial reaction that we have is to take a photo with it or to take a photo of it, post it in our social media, and hence say goodbye to it without even trying to see what it's saying or why was it made, you know. And that was the thing that I wanted to address, because as human beings, I was observing that we were being so instant with everything, and our intentions were also very instant, that we failed to really answer what needs to be answered. So somehow there are a lot of layers that I wanted to peel through this artwork. So how did I present this one? This was projected in the gallery wall, 3 by 3 meter gallery wall. And people had two options. There was actually a headphones. There was a headphones that was hanging in the wall. And they had an option to either just watch it or to turn on the headphones or put on the headphones and listen to it. So the aesthetic experience of viewing it versus viewing it and listening to the audio is very different. And so the lens and interpretation is also different. And that was my intention, because I was claiming in my paper, basically, and in my research, that we tend to dismiss a lot of things, and that we only want to see what we want to see. So technically, to really take out all the highfalutin things about this project, that was my intention. To tell people that we're just, we tend to like scratching skin surface, and we tend to not really run deep. And it was inspired by Arnold Toynbee's theory of um, theory of study of history and Nelson Black's When Nations Die. So these are things that really inspired me when I was creating this work. I wanted people to have visual retention. I wanted them to watch it and really be able to reflect on it upon their individual time. So that was my intention. It was to catch out the errors, point the errors and the causes, okay, which is technological advancement and development and degeneration and other things. And yeah, I talked about social decay in this project and the paper that I presented, and the sites are open to but not limited to empty playgrounds, construction sites, building ruins, talahiban, rural grounds, squatters area. Okay, so I took my time. It took me, this was a 1 month production wherein I had to film in different sites and edit and perform in front of the projector as well. So before this was exhibited, guys, it actually had a lot of revisions and comments by my mentor. And I want to present to you the process behind the artwork. Before I had the visual output, we were asked to create a theoretical framework and a conceptual framework. So the one on the left is the theoretical framework, and the one on the right is the conceptual framework. So I knew what I wanted to study or try to apply in my study. That's the theory of decay by Arnold Toynbee. And it I also wanted to talk about the becoming of a dominant minority, meaning, poverty, loss, dirt, degeneration as that dominant minority. And then, of course, forming of the universal state, meaning yung mga everyday occurrences and documentation of those. And then, yeah, talking about proletariat, external and internal, and of course, archaism, futurism, detachment, and transcendence. So basically, those are the theories that I dabbled on in my paper. I don't want to bore you, but basically, there was that. It started from there. And then, only then, was I able to come up with a conceptual framework wherein I had to figure out my output. Okay. So after studying the theory and after understanding what the theory really meant, was I only given the goal to create um, a map or a study for this particular output. So for my visual studies, I came up with three. I wanted to disrupt color and I wanted to distort. So I had to study how to distort because at that time I wasn't really good with editing. So those are the learning curves that I had to also deal with along with the research that I was doing, and then combining the techniques together to create the glitch, because that's what I really wanted to exhibit, that we are actually moving glitches and that we are living glitches of this generation. And so these are the output studies that I also presented after my paper was approved. And then this is actually the paper that I presented to my mentor before my exhibit was approved. So I wanted to show the whole process to you guys because oftentimes we stop here. Oftentimes we only start and stop to the end to the end game, how we want it to look like. But honestly, this wasn't how I really wanted it to look like. But upon revisions, mentoring, discussions, and even comments, okay, it had to be, kumbaga, polished at the same time. So, I wanted to remind you guys that in your thesis, regardless if you're doing in material innovation or design exploration or creative exploration, you really shouldn't focus on the output too much first, because if your output is the star, then when it is time for you to present your work in front of people, and they ask you about your theoretical framework and your creative framework, and you cannot present anything solid, you cannot explain the process, then you failed to really address what you want to address, because it's communication and research is about that. You want to communicate your ideas through the paper, okay, through the research, the facts that you've gathered, the data that you've gathered, and the output is just secondary. So I want to highlight that, and I wanted to show you that regardless if it's just a minor art project, it actually took a lot before it became to what it is. And honestly, I've known and I've seen a lot of artists who practice this type of thinking, and makikita mo yung work nila, iba. Iba ang trabaho ng artist na nagre-research versus ang artist na gumagawa lang ng art for the sake of posting on Instagram and other things. I don't know. But yeah, that's what I want you guys to remember. I wanted to leave with you with this. Creativity is not enough. Okay, intentionality is very crucial in a research project. Creative research requires collaboration. You can't just do it alone. Sometimes you're so clouded by your ego na feeling mo ang galing mo or feeling mo tama yung process mo, but you need to listen to your mentor. Listen to your mentor well. And you have to read the things that you produced, your abstract, your methodology, your RRL. You have to make someone read it and process it for you, because only then will you be able to see if the things that you wrote are easy to understand or are even understandable at all. So it requires collaboration. And if may mga bagay na hindi mo alam and hindi mo kayang panindigan, kailangan mong mag-hire ng professional to do it for you. But of course, the heavy work really, the heavy load still comes from you. Creative research is best combined with scientific research methods. I wanted to end with this. Okay. You cannot do creative research alone. It has to have facts. It has to have basis from data that are already existing. And if data is not enough, then create your own data by experimenting on your own and documenting that experimentation, because that documentation would also in turn contribute to the ones who are going to study it in the future. Last but not the least, guys, your conclusion is someone else's research question or problem. Your conclusion is not the solution to the world. Basically, that's just what I wanted to give out. Your solution could be a start of someone's research problem, because someone might find some faults in your research alone. And I want you to know that that's okay. And that's what creative research is all about. Thank you guys for being with me, and I hope you learned something this afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you, Miss Hannah. I hope it's an eye-opener for you guys, no? Any questions, guys? Baka may gusto magtanong? Pahabol daw, pahabol. You may off your, off your mic, di ba? Para at least marinig ka namin.
Oo, may raise your hand. Baka man gusto na tinatamad sila mag-type, gusto na magtanong directly to Miss Hannah.
Yeah, pwede naman, wala naman problema. Actually, it's an eye-opener for us mentor also eh. Siyempre, unang-una, walang bago. Tama nga naman si Miss Hannah doon, di ba?
Sana ma-inspire yung ibang mentors din natin na.
Tama yan. And yung importance ng process, right?
Yes. Oo. In-emphasize ni Miss Hannah yun. Proseso pa rin.
Any questions po?
Natatakot yata sila.
Ba, thesis na, nahihiya. Bakit ba kayo nahihiya? Baka feeling ko natulog na yung mga yan eh.
Baka
natulog na naman kayo.
Medyo natakot na takot sa ni Miss Hannah. Presentation ni Miss Hannah. Kasi ang ganda.
Baka in-o sila kasi matatapos na yung thesis ni Miss Hannah sila. Nasa pa lang, mag-i-endorsement na kayo guys. By the way, on July 18 to 23 is your endorsement. Biglang pinag eh, no? Yes.
Baka binabalikan na nila yung paper nila ngayon.
Ayaw na mag-submit bigla. Mag-ganun. Ayan yan. Push lang.
Yeah. So, yan. Kung
Mentors, baka naman may tanong, si Sir Aldous or si Sir Noel.
hindi natin maririnig si Sir Aldous kasi sa OBS
Sir Chris, Sir Jim. Wala.
Oh. So yeah.
Wait, sir, meron.
Ano?
Ayan, may
Meron.
pumasok.
Okay.
Where could I begin on studies on art theories, especially for someone like me who struggles in comprehending them? Miss Hannah.
Okay. So, it really doesn't start with journals. I didn't start with reading journals. I started by reading about artworks, particularly of Henry Matisse and the other contemporary artists of our time, like Jeff Koons, and kasi I'm very into contemporary art. So I started by looking at their process, and it's only after you look at their process wherein it's a rabbit hole, technically. You really won't get into the rabbit hole if you'll just read on one source or two sources. So, but basically, one of the things that I wanted to share with you is you can start by reading through not just websites that give pictures, There are good websites like Art Story, okay, and My Modern Net. Okay, these are websites that actually explain somehow, parang nilalagay nila yung abstract ng artist sa mga artworks nila. And most often than not, artists who also research will mention theories and will mention philosophers that they adhere to when it comes to producing their artworks. So that's how you can start. And the rest will just follow through for you naturally, because you can't choke yourself right away, especially if you're having a hard time comprehending. Like me, okay, it didn't come easy. So start with the basic resources and dig deeper after that.
Maybe Miss Hannah, you can share with us your references na rin para, diba?
Yeah, pwede. I'll give the references na lang siguro to Sir Ven. Lalagay ko sa isang Google Docs.
Yes, please. Ayan. Alam niyo kung saan
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Question, may pahabol. Can we have a copy of Miss Hannah's PowerPoint? I think may recording tayo nito.
Yeah. May YouTube naman yan later. So, better yet, watch na lang. Siyempre, we need to protect Miss Hannah's slides. Siyempre.
Yan. Pero may recording. Mas importante naman kasi talaga yung recording.
Yes.
So, magkakaroon tayo nun.
Hindi po lecture ito.
Upload ko sa Big Sky, guys.
Sanay na kasi yung mga bata eh. Sorry, i-copy na lang namin yung ano yan. Pero syempre, di ba?
May PowerPoint. Upload nyo na po ba sa Big Sky?
Yeah, so, yes, thank you. Thank you, Sir Aldous, for being there for our program. To all the mentors na nandito, sila Sir Noel, Sir Chris, Miss Erica, Sir Jim. Yan. Sino pa ba? Wala na.
Thanks, Miss Hannah, for the presentation.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. So, guys, off your camera. Medyo muna tayo. Camera muna tayo para medyo yung mga makeup natin baka yung mga color ng mga lipstick.
Turn on your cameras for photo documentation, please.
Yan, si Alfonso Umalio.
Hi, Alfonso. Wala iba.
Anyone else?
There.
Ayan. Sino pa? Dalawa pa lang.
I said, Aaron, Kian.
Guys.
Genesis, Carlos.
Uy, ayos ang setup ni Carlos Prado. Parang parang
DJ lang, diba?
Parang baka vlogger na yan ng gym.
Yes, niya.
Alright.
Jen, where are you? Nawala si Sir
Okay.
Jim.
So, sige, magpipicture na ako. Okay. Hold that smiles. 1, 2, 3. Okay, next page ha. Dalawang page po kasi. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Thank you guys. Thank you
Thank you,
po. Thank you po
guys.
sa lahat.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Bye,
God bless.
guys.
Bye.
Presentation.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Happy
Bye.
weekend.